Alright, I'm sitting here in my car. I decided to jump in my little Lupo to do a quick test. I was just saying in this video I posted yesterday that the Canon 6D, one of its best features, my favorite thing about it, why it's become my new favorite camera, is because the image quality from the 6D is unbelievably similar to the image quality I see in my Canon 5D Classic, which I have right here. And although I've never done lab tests, I've not done the exact same shot, exact same settings side by side to make sure everything is precisely perfect. Every camera renders differently. Every camera is kind of like its own film stock. It has its own way of kind of showing the world. No two RAW files are the same from different cameras. And the reason why the 5D Classic is so popular specifically is because of the way it renders, is because of its image quality, the way that it shows the world, the way it tells its story, or the way it tells your story. And I get the same feeling, that same type of interpretation of the world when I shoot with my 6D. So right now what I'm going to do for this short little video is nothing fancy. I'm not taking a huge vacation. I'm not going through into the mountains or the beach. I'm just going around my neighborhood here just to take some quick shots where I'm going to use the same lens, which is going to be just this very basic, very simple, very cheap 40mm f2.8 little pancake lens, which is great, by the way. I'm going to use that same lens, but I'm going to change it between my 6D and my 5D Classic. And I'm not going to go out of my way to try and make sure that things are as identical as possible, because there's always going to be a difference. Even if I took what is supposed to be the same photo with two different 5D Classics, a slight difference in the angle, or a cloud going overhead, or a reflection suddenly coming through from a car is going to change what the sensor sees. It's going to change the white balance a little bit. It's going to change the exposure a little bit. So even two photos from two 5D Classics taken a few seconds apart aren't going to look exactly the same because you can't replicate that exact moment. So I'm not even going to try with the 6D versus the 5D Classic. I'm just taking a photo of a place or of a thing, and then taking another photo of that place or thing with the 5D Classic after the 6D. And the idea here is that although they're of course not going to be identical, and that's not the goal, I want to show and see for myself the way that it interprets things. What does it do with the shadows? What does it do with the highlights? And how does it render colors? What are we going to see with the reds versus the greens versus the blues or the yellows? Color temperature, just basically, again, nothing is going to be identical, and that's not the goal, but what is the overall feel of the photo? What is the overall mood and the way that it's kind of showing the world? And I'm going to see how it compares when using the same lens at more or less the same time in the same place with these two different cameras, and we'll see kind of how they look. And if they are different, or if they're drastically different, then we'll get a better idea for maybe what you would prefer between the 6D and the 5D Classic. as I'm comparing the photos that I took, trying to find the ones that were most similar, I am noticing as I'm zooming in a few times, there's a aspect of the 5D Classic that I think I mentioned in the 5D Classic review, but I forgot to mention in my 6D review, is that one of the huge advantages of the 5D Classic that a lot of people love, that people will talk about and reference, is the fact that it had a very, very weak anti-aliasing filter, to the point that it was almost non-existent. And the result was that you have this big full frame sensor with only 12 megapixels, most 12.8 or something, but they're very large pixels, and with not much of an anti-aliasing filter, those 12 megapixels do a lot. The photos are shockingly sharp. I remember Ken Rockwell in one of his reviews talking about how he would compare the photos from his 5D Classic to other cameras of higher megapixels, and the photos from his 5D Classic were actually sharper than from other cameras with higher megapixels. And that's actually what's happened. I'm noticing here. Just looking at the photo as a whole, you would never notice it. This is something you only notice if you're zooming into 100% and really pixel peeping. But I'll throw a reference up on the screen for you here. I noticed that if I look at these two photos side by side, I used the exact same lens. I was standing in the same location, and I focused using the center focusing point. I would focus and recompose, and I focus on the exact same point of the photo with the exact same aperture. So there should be no difference, artificial differences in sharpness. Yet when I look zoomed in at 100% at the sharpness of the 5D Classic versus the 6D, the 5D Classic is noticeably sharper. So much sharper at 12 megapixels than the 6D's 20 megapixels that I thought maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe I missed focus on this one photo. So I went to a different photo and I zoomed in and I saw the exact same thing again. The 5D Classic is noticeably sharper. I thought, okay, maybe I missed focus on both photos. So I went to a third photo, and as I kept comparing more and more, I'm seeing that, yes, in fact, it's true. The 5D Classic, though it's only 12 megapixels, which is always more than enough. If you have 6 megapixels or even 4, that's plenty. You can do large print, as you've seen from a million different YouTubers. That's plenty. But really, it's not just the megapixels. There are so many other things, like the resolving power of your lens, for example, which even that gets overblown and hyped too much. But the lens will make a difference. The settings will make a difference. There are so many things that will artificially make a photo look less sharp, that you could avoid or just learn to work around, or things you can do to optimize the sharpness of your photo. But for those who think that comparing just the spec sheets of saying, well, the 5D Classic is 12 megapixels, whereas the 6D is 20, or the 5D Mark II is 20, or the 5D Mark III is 22, or whatever it is. This is a great example that I want to say the lack of an anti-aliasing filter, there is one there, but again, it is so weak that it might as well not exist. The essential lack of an AA filter means that the result of the 12 versus 20 megapixels in these two cameras is that the 12 megapixels actually has more detail. It is sharper. So that's an interesting fact that you might want to consider.